first thing really is a bit of context in terms of what did happen in the summer, because it's quite hard to pick your way through some of it. What happened initially was that even before we got the exam results, we'd had a letter, all the secondary schools had had a letter from Ofqual, the organisation tasked with maintaining status standards within examinations, to say that there would be some changes in the exam outcomes in August. And there were a number of reasons for this that they were pointing out. One was, and again this is current and I'll come back to it, because of the number of early entries that they were picking up from kids in year 10, in some cases even earlier, key stage 4. Two, because there was a significant increase, particularly as regards English, in what they call the IGCSE rather than the GCSE, because they were finding that some schools were entering students in the same subject but with different exam boards. So they were entering them in maths with both Edexcel and OCR or AQA in order to try and maximise chances. And they also flagged up what we already knew was going to happen, that the exams in science had been made more difficult, and that was likely to impact upon outcomes. So we were given all of that even before we'd seen any results actually in August. So that provided us with a bit of context for what was going to happen. Just to take that a bit further, that's what it meant in terms of nationally the change in English language entries. Number of schools that started to use the IGCSE. Now the reason they were doing that was because, if you remember rightly, last year the grade boundaries for English shifted between January and June, and it caused havoc in terms of the outcomes in a number of schools. So some schools at that point took the decision to enter them for a different qualification, in this case IGCSE. Based on the outcomes that we had in August, it doesn't look like it made a vast amount of difference, because actually, nationally, English outcomes barely changed.
But they might have gone down.
By about %. A star to C, they probably went down. It does depend whether you look at all those kids, the entire cohort, or whether you start splitting it down into pre-16, the ones who took it early, 16-year-olds, and also now there's a big chunk of kids who are taking it post-16, and I'll come on to that as well in a minute, because there's a whole new cohort of kids there. So it depends on the age group you're talking about in terms of whether it went up or down. Actually, 16-year-olds, it held fairly steady. It dipped overall because you had a lot more early entries, and you also had kids trying to get it the second or third time post-16. And those two things together, taking all those together, depressed the figures. But the actual 16-year-olds just about held steady.
So what's this IG, international GCSE?
Yes, yeah. It's an exam that's done, it's Cambridge Board I think, and it's done a lot in independent schools, because it's supposed to have more of an international benchmark. As I say, overall it doesn't seem to have had a massive effect in terms of actual outcomes. I don't think schools benefited greatly from it, but they'd lost confidence because of the shifting in the grade boundaries in the actual GCSE. Science, they felt that the previous specification didn't have sufficient rigour, so they tightened it up, and results did dip. Not massively, 2-3%, but they did go down. And I think it's clear that the general line of travel is to make GCSEs more rigorous. I mean, to face it, the Secretary of State wanted to get rid of them. His method of choice would be to have gone back to an O-level type exam. Now, obviously that didn't work, that hasn't happened, but they are becoming more rigorous. Okay, there's a couple of other things that I'll pick up a bit later. What I also want to try and do is to talk a little bit about the new national curriculum, which starts in earnest next year, but which schools will be preparing for over the course of this academic year, because because it starts next September. Those aren't my aims necessarily. They're what we're trying to do as a service in trying to make governors and people in schools aware of changes to national curriculum and what that means for schools. Because in secondary schools, for example, it's the same teachers who are trying to prepare for changes at Key Stage 3 as it is who are coping with changes in specification at Key Stage 4. And in many cases there'll be a whole body of work that's going on in order to try and prepare for that. And again, as governors, that's something to be aware of. Okay, so we have a new statutory secondary national curriculum started in 2014, except for English, Maths and Science at Key Stage 4. They've delayed those. There are significant issues around those subject areas. We've spoken a lot about that tonight already. So they will actually start in September 2015. So we don't know exactly what that will look like yet. But the rest will start next year. Okay? And I'll take you into a little bit more detail about exactly what that is. This is what it says at the beginning of that document. It does acknowledge, within a sort of overarching bit at the start, that the curriculum is part of an overall provision that the school makes for its kids, which includes the development of skills, the development of an awareness of society and community, and all those other bits of the broader curriculum, the enhanced curriculum, including extracurricular activity that takes place. However, it also says that the national curriculum provides an outline of core knowledge. And I've already mentioned the knowledge thing once tonight, and I'm going to pick it up again in a minute. Okay? Because the first aim, it says, is that the national curriculum provides people with an introduction to the essential knowledge. So it is much more about what kids know. It's not exactly, grad grind and facts, but it's a shift in emphasis. And as schools, we've got to try and be aware of that, but also make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that it's a broad and balanced curriculum, and we want kids to get a full experience of the curriculum, not just, being able to recite the dates of the Kings and Queens of England. Important though that might be, on one level it should be about something broader than that. So there is that shift from what might be deemed a more skill-based to a more knowledge-based curriculum. In terms of the statutory subjects, there are no major changes. So, Key Stage 3, the core remains the same: English, Maths and Science. The foundation subjects are art, citizenship, I'll come back to computing, DT, languages, geography, history, music, RE, and sex and relationships education. The change is that it was ICT, but now it is very definitely computing. It's not just about operation, it's about understanding how they work. It's a higher level order of knowledge and understanding about the processes of computing, not just how you word process, how you set up a Word document, how you do an Excel spreadsheet. It goes beyond that into programming and that kind of activity, how it's used as a multimedia tool. So
with so much information available on the internet, why do you think he's focusing so much on knowledge?
Depends whether you're asking me as an individual or is it in terms of the LA officer role. I think
either. I just don't understand why he's focusing so much on knowledge.
The individual would be more interesting.
I'm sure it would. I think he does hanker back to, hence the focus on O levels and things like that, a more narrow curriculum and testing. Testing regime that tests what kids know. Hence the move away from coursework, hence the move in terms of BTECs becoming more rigorous and being examined at the end, whereas before it was continuous assessment. I think they see the benchmark in terms of educational achievement being around what children know. We're seeing the same thing at Key Stage 2. Again, I think you've got to put it in a broader context about what schools are for. And I know Sue will be telling primary governors tonight that the curriculum is part of that broad and balanced provision, and I think that's what we still focus on. But in terms of what's examined, I think it will be.
It's easier to examine knowledge than it is to examine a skill. Sadly.
In terms of the Key Stage 4, again, it's similar. You've got a core there, which is pretty much the same as it is now. English, Maths, Science, computing though again, citizenship, PE, RE, SRE. Those are still the statutory elements that all schools have to deliver.
And also, Russ, that we've now gone, languages in Key Stage 3 is the core.
No, it's foundation.
Sorry, foundation, I
Yeah.
stand corrected.
Yeah.
Missing in Key Stage 4.
Yeah, I'm going to go on to those bits now.
Go on.
Okay. Because what you've got at Key Stage 4 now are entitlement areas. The terminology changes. It's no longer foundation subjects, they're called entitlement areas. And you have 4 entitlement areas. You have the arts, you have design technology, humanities, and modern foreign languages. And then within that, arts are design, music, dance, drama, performing arts, PT would be the resistant materials, food, textiles, technology, graphics, product design, or that raft of things. Humanities, because RE is part of the core, you're mainly teaching, talking about geography and history, and then you've got MFL, whatever that is within schools. Now, children don't have to study them, but they do have an entitlement to be offered them. So the school has to make provision for them.
Doesn't say that there, does it? It says statutory entitlement to be able to study. It doesn't say they have to. So the idea is they might be offered them, they might pick up all 4 of those areas
Yes.
that you mentioned. So some youngsters could have a massive workload.
Well, they're still under the same amount of time in the week. And
So reduce time on some of the other subjects.
I don't think it's suggesting that necessarily. In most secondary schools you'll have maybe 3 option choices, depending on whether you do something like triple science. So you could do a language, you could do at least 1 humanities, and you could do another subject. Okay, on top of your English, Maths, Science, and then your core. And there is no suggestion that they have to do them all. They just have to have the opportunity to do at least 1 from each if they want to.
It does not depend on numbers.
Well, it will do within
Because
it will.
Yes,
It would.
As well,
It would.
Yeah,
It would.
as well
I mean,
as
and it always does.
if you're the only child who wants to do design technology at a particular point,
Yeah.
then that's going to be it, isn't it? So you might, it's just to play with words, isn't it?
No, I think it does.
Schools got
It
to
does.
offer, but actually, if you really wanted to do them, it would be very difficult if the numbers didn't add up.
Yeah, and that's always the case. But at least you've been offered them. You have an entitlement.
But it says in one of 4 areas, it doesn't say one
You don't do
each
them
of those 4 courses.
It says to be able to study a subject in each of those 4 areas. Therefore,
Yeah.
you could, in theory, study each of those areas. You could choose
could.
to study
And students do.
a humanities, an art, a design technology, and a modern language. So you could choose to study 4.
And in some schools,
could.
you would find that actually
yeah,
they make it compulsory to study
But
a humanity.
it's quite. It's challenging for smaller schools, isn't it?
Yes.
To
It
be
is.
able to
Yeah.
offer those.
It is.
And because also there's the cost element, isn't there? You can't afford to run small groups.
No.
There's also the whole sort of options, process, isn't it? And actually fitting it all together
That's what's
and
the
making it fair. So equality of opportunity, I think, is a bit iffy around that one, I would say.
You can offer it to them on pupil premium. Yeah.
But so technically, therefore, if you had a school, very few, probably not the case, but very few theoretically don't go for dance. You'd have to provide dance.
No, you wouldn't have to provide dance. You'd have to provide
Right,
an arts subject. Doesn't have to be dance. There
So
is
you
no.
actually, so if the 2 or 3 students said they'd like to do dance, you would say can't do it because we haven't
No,
got
you don't have to offer it, and they don't. I mean, it wouldn't be in your option choice. You know, if you
Right.
didn't have capacity to do it, you wouldn't offer it.
So
But you'd have to offer an art subject.
So you could actually just offer
You could
art
offer
design.
an art subject. You can offer art design. You could offer RM2 and food.
Yeah.
You know, a couple of DT subjects, a language,
Yeah.
and history of adultery. So you can actually, you know, you can make an offer on a relatively small number of subjects.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I'm just
But
thinking how we've managed in Anthony Gel, because we're a small school.
Yeah.
Some of our students take a GCSE in year 10
Yes.
because we mix the classes year 10 and year 11 to
Yeah.
make it a big enough cohort. But if they're saying you can't take the exam at the end of year 10, is that an issue? Is that going to be an issue? Are we not going to be allowed to take the exam at the end of year 10?
Actually, you can take the exam at the end of year 10 if that is the end of the course.
You can't take it again at year 11
But you wouldn't be able to do
to
it.
try and get a better
Well,
grade.
you could do resit,
Well,
but
you
it
can
wouldn't.
do
The
resit,
school
but it
wouldn't
doesn't
get the
count.
benefits.
Yes,
In
that's-
the
yes,
end,
yes, sorry, yes,
you
that's
can
right.
keep, you
Yeah,
can take
you can take it again, but it wouldn't count in the results.
No, but it counts
I
for
think
the child
that's the
if they get
individual,
a
yes.
better grade.
Yes, absolutely right, and that's
It's
what
clear
matters.
that
Yeah.
they would like all GCSE courses to be 2 years
Yes.
with a linear process and an examination at the end.
Yes. But if we crush a 2-year course into a year, because we need to get more students
Yes.
into that
I think
classroom.
yes. Again, in terms of the accountability bit, you've just got to be making sure that those kids do make all the progress, that they are capable of making. Because otherwise, you're at risk.
I don't know if you're aware, but I've invited all the secondary heads into County Hall this Wednesday to talk about this issue around early entry. And I completely understand the anger and fervour around it. However, as governors, you need to be assured that whatever they do, whatever decision you take in terms of early entry, you need to be clear that it's not going to have an adverse impact on your progress, and therefore have a really detrimental effect should you be inspected in 2014. You know, we're not operating from a position of strength as local authority at the moment, given what I said earlier, and Ofsted will come out, and as we've seen with Gate Science Academy, they'll put your school in special measures. Now for me, there's a bit of a bigger picture to consider here in terms of what the government want in a Royal Academy system. And if Mr Gove doesn't get it one way, he can certainly get it another. And that's by putting you all in special measures.
Yeah.
Which is what he's doing.
Absolutely. Now, careful consideration needs to be given to this because at the end of the day, if you continue with the early entry, as people have planned to do, it is very unlikely that you're going to hit your 3 levels and 4 levels of progress. That will trigger an inspection next year, and we have the evidence to show that that will result in your school being in a category.
Because they'll find a way.
Exactly. Now, I've not got the resources nor the energy to be able to fight every single battle for every single school that we have in Derbyshire for this issue. So, careful consideration has to be given. I'm having a lot of difficulty with a couple of schools at the moment in terms of, trying to. We are challenging the DFE around a number of schools in categories at the moment, around trying to maintain them as local authority schools, and it's hard work and costly work. If you replicate that across the whole of the county, they're faced with an impossible situation. The early entry more as a mock exam as opposed to entering them for that grade, you will find yourself in a mess. Okay. So difficult discussions to be had. I will talk to heads. I will write to you as chairs of governors too, in terms of what I'm asking you to ask your leaders to do in terms of that risk assessment for your own school. But I do realise that individual schools have very individual circumstances around this issue.
I mean, I will pick it up before we finish as well, but I mean, I think it's, whilst we're talking...
Sorry, I came up with
No, it's fine. If we're all clear on that bit, in terms of what you have to offer or not, then we're moving on. I'm going to mention something else, which seems a bit strange when we're talking about secondary, but it is important, and will be more important as we move down the line. Sue is talking to governors, primary governors through there, about the new national primary curriculum. And as part of that, she'll also be mentioning about changes to assessment arrangements. Now, obviously, what happens in Key Stage 2 in terms of assessment and testing has an impact on secondary schools, because that's currently the benchmark in terms of the progress measure. they're looking at how many levels of progress kids make from Key Stage 2. So what happens there is of great importance to secondary schools. And effectively what will be happening is that national curriculum levels are going. They will be removed. And the schools will then have to determine their own approach to ongoing formative assessment. And at the end of Key Stage 2, what they'll be having is this testing regime of some kind, and we don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet, as to whether students are considered to be, the phrase they're using is secondary ready. And there will be an 85% floor standard. So within that cohort of kids, within that school, are a minimum of them, 85% of them, floor standard, secondary ready. Now, inevitably, if we don't have a set of Key Stage 2 levels, in terms of measuring how many levels progress they make, you're in a different situation. Now, obviously, if this comes in 2016, we're still a couple of years away from that, and it will take a number of years till that works through the system, because you'll have kids in school for 4 or 5 years after that who have got national curriculum levels. But eventually, we'll be in a situation whereby they will have to look again at the progress measure, because students won't have that data. And as yet, we don't know what that will look like. Now, of course, between now and then, we've got another election. So, anything could happen after that point. Because it always does. But it's something, again, to be aware of, that actually the progress measure that everybody's focusing on so much at the minute will eventually change, because they'll have to. So they won't have the baseline data in the same way. Okay, so just to reinforce in terms of timelines, Key Stage 3 and a majority of Key Stage 4 subjects starting in 2014, English, Maths and Science, Key Stage 4 starting in 2015. The other sort of statutory change now, of course, is at Key Stage 5, as of this September, if a child goes into post-16 education, be that within a sixth form, or within an FE institution, or within a training provider, and they don't have level 2 English or Maths, then they have to, as part of their programme of study, retake that. Now, it could be a GCSE, it could be an IGCSE, it could be functional skills, it could be in terms of kids for whom English is a second language, some form of ESOL qualification, but they do have to continue and retake, attempt to get level 2 English or Maths if they don't have it. Both if they don't have either, although the chances of them going into an A-level course or a level 3 college course, if they haven't got either of them, are somewhat slimmer.
So is that just up to 18 then? So they go to college,
yes,
and they just keep having to take it over and over again until they're 18?
Pretty
They don't
much.
have to keep taking it for the rest of their lives, because this is what I'm
I
telling
don't
my
think
year 10s at the moment.
2 minutes, yes. Okay. No,
What do you think? The rest of your
no, I don't think so.
So you might as well get it
I
now.
don't think so. But it's interesting in that, you can take it as many times as you like post-16, but
But you
not
can't before.
pre-16.
Yeah.
That's an interesting
That's true.
distinction. But that's, again, in terms of particularly sixth form schools, that has to be there, that opportunity for them has to be there. I think it is in the majority of sixth form schools, but it's absolutely...
This is the time to mention is to go took 6 times, within 6 attempts to pass the motoring driving test.
Driving test.
Yes. Interesting.
But he didn't take it early exams.
It was a mock.
Yeah, and then just to finish off, we've already had mentioned the needs talks at some length in terms of the changes that happened last week in relation to early entry and performance tables. The other thing to be aware of in relation to that, though, is also the changes to the discount codes. One of the things that I think has not been as well publicised, and maybe slipped through a little bit, is the fact that at GCSE, the exam boards have now changed what they call the discount codes. Each GCSE has a code that goes with it. And where they think that there is duplication in terms of some of the subject content, they've given the subjects the same discount code. So, for example, art and design now has the same discount code as art and design textiles and art and design graphics. Drama now has the same discount code as dance and performing arts. What that means is if the child does both of those subjects, dance and drama, in the performance tables, only one of them will count because they have the same discount code. The kid will get both. They'll count as 2 grades for the child, but in terms of the 5EN, it will only count once if they do more than one subject with the same discount code. So if a child does art and textiles, art, design, fine art, design, textiles, that would only count as 1 grade in the performance tables. Same with dance, drama and performing arts.
So what's the implications then for that for the school? Are there implications?
There are implications if you've got significant numbers of kids who are taking more than one subject with the same discount code.
So, in other words, similar subjects.
Yeah. So again, I think it's important that schools have done the research in terms of being aware of what the implications of that may be for them in terms of their projections in relation to 5E. Okay. I think I've had my 2 minutes to tell me unless there's any
That's very useful,
questions.
thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.